3 days ago, I finally hit the 4 or 5 pounds bench press at a body weight of 152 pounds. And when I started lifting weights, I wasn't really good on the bench press. I was barely able to do 150 pounds, so more or less my body weight. So my goal today is to take you through the program techniques that I used and also the current bench press routine I now follow in order to maximize your strength in the bench press. So if you're willing to get to the next level, here is the perfect bench press routine. Day 1 will start with one of the best foundations of any good powerlifting program, and it's going to be the wide grip bench press with heavy sets of 3 repetitions. The goal on that day is to accumulate heavy reps in order to drive the adaptations required to lift more weight. Here, we're especially targeting the central nervous system adaptations. I would recommend you use weights from 80 up to 90% of your 1RM. Keep in mind, the goal is to be able to progressively overload the weights over the course of multiple weeks, so make sure you don't go bonkers on the first session of the first week, because then you won't be able to do the remaining days of training properly. Because it's very specific work with low reps, it's actually pretty hard to accumulate volume, which is why when I'm done with the heavy triples, I like to do an exercise where the goal will be to actually accumulate volume, especially targeting the chest, because using a wider grip will drive that chest growth, and we can finish that up with that volume exercise. I usually have 2 exercises I do, and I make a rotation every 4 to 6 weeks. The first one is some good old dumbbell bench press. Since we already did the heavy work on the wide grip, I like to do higher reps with lighter weights. So usually it sets from 10 to 15 reps. And the other exercise I recommend, especially if you're a beginner, is a regular chest machine. Why do I say especially for beginners? Because usually when you're setting up on the bench press, you're doing your arch, you're anchoring your shoulders, you're positioning the bar in your hand. So you're creating a lot of fatigue with all of the technical requirements to properly perform the lift. So using a chest machine is a very good way to limit all of that, because when you're in a machine, you simply have to push without having to think of all of the other technical aspects. So if you're an advanced lifter, you can probably do the chest work with some dumbbell bench press. If you're a beginner lifter, I would probably recommend you do a regular chest machine. We're now on to day 2 of the program, and day 2 will be more of the power building type of programming. The goal is to accumulate volume, is to accumulate hypertrophy, especially on the muscle groups that don't get worked as much with the wide grip bench. And those muscle groups are the triceps and also the deltoids. Since we already hit chest with the wide grip bench the day prior, on this day I like to go with the close grip variation. The good thing is it alleviates some of the stress off the chest and directs it towards the triceps and the deltoids, which is, again, like I said, one of the goals of this workout. And also, one of the other strengths of the close grip is usually as powerlifters we want to reduce the range of motions in order to lift more weight, but having some bigger range of motion movements is actually very interesting in order to build up strength. And the closer your hands are on the bar, the bigger range of motion you'll end up having. So for the close grip, I would recommend you close your grip from 2 to 4 fingers with your usual grip. As far as reps go, going for sets of 5 is probably a good middle ground. You still are close to the strength work in terms of rep scheme, but also at the same time, you can accumulate volume with sets of 5. In terms of sets, I recommend you do between 3 and 5 sets, depending on the weekly volume, with weights from 65% up to 75% of your 1RM. The goal on that day is to go lighter than the day prior, and like I said, focus more on volume and muscle development. When we're done with the close grip work, we can now focus the accessory work. I usually do 1 exercise per muscle group at this moment, because the close grip is still fatiguing and we're still under the fatigue of the previous day. So having 1 exercise where you'll hit the triceps and 1 exercise where you'll hit the deltoids is probably the best way to go. For the triceps, I like to do an overhead variation, so overhead cable pull, and for the deltoids, I usually go with some lighter dumbbell military press. On that day, I like to take the accessories close to failure, as I usually have a day or two of full rest once I'm done. So that's why I go with a typical gym bro split, where I do 3 sets of 8 up to 12 reps per movement per muscle group. On the first 2 sets, I like to be 1 to 2 reps shy from failure, and on the last set of every exercise, I will take that set to failure in order to maximize growth. After day 2, recovery is essential. In order to become stronger, you have to obviously train hard, but recovery is the other key aspect. So once you're done with the day 1 and day 2, make sure you take at least 1, maybe up to 2 days of recovery. And on those days, make sure you optimize your sleep, but also your nutrition, especially with a lot of proteins, in order to improve your muscle recovery. If you guys like this program so far, I just wanted to let you know it's currently available on my training app. With one single monthly subscription, you can access to more than 15 powerlifting programs that I personally written. And also note that there is no engagement. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. The app does everything for you. It calculates every weight you have to hit based off of your 1RM. It guides you through a proper progressive overload. So to put it up simply, you just have to follow the program and you'll make some gains. If you want to blow up your bench in 2025, make sure you check out the programs on thepanache.app. Now back to the video. We're now on to day 3. Day 2 was more of a power building type day approach, but day 3 is a typical powerlifting focused approach. The reason for that is simple. In any sport, there are days where the athletes practice the skill of the sport. And I think as powerlifters, we should do the same. A single is when you just do 1 rep exactly like you would in any competition of powerlifting. And the goal of that day is to prepare you in the most specific way possible in order to perform the bench press. In powerlifting competitions, we have a rule book that says that you have to pause the bench at the bottom. So you have to lower the bar until it touches your chest, pause it up until the referee gives you the press command, and then you're good to go. So on that day, what I do is I do a variation called the 2 seconds pause bench press. The goal of that variation, I think you understand, is to really mimic as much as possible the competition setup where you have to pause the bar at the bottom. So on that day, I'll do a 2 seconds pause bench press single where I'll make sure my pause is good. In terms of weights, I like to use around 88 up to 92% of my 1RM on that day. Keep in mind, more is not necessarily better. So if you're new to having those heavy single practice day, skipping to 88% is probably a good choice. Make sure you don't go crazy heavy. The goal of the day is to get the specific practice, and the problem is if you go too heavy, you'll probably cut the pause short. And on that day, you do want to have the full-on 2 seconds pause at the bottom of your bench press. Once I'm done with the heavy single practice work, I now go to regular volume on the bench press. We haven't accumulated a lot of reps on the other days with the comp bench press, which is why it's the goal of that day. So grab somewhere between 60 and 75% of your 1RM and you want to accumulate volume. So with sets from 6 up to 8 reps. After that, given the amount of volume, the amount of overall stress we had over the course of the week with day 1, day 2, and now day 3, I like to call it there because I think doing more than that would be an overkill. Again, keep in mind, in order to become stronger, yeah, we do need to lift heavy, but we also have to recover from the lifting we're doing. If we're just lifting weights and we're not recovering, we're not actually going to get stronger. So usually after day 3, I like to call it there. I have my heavy single practice work, I have my volume on my comp bench press, and now the goal is to rest on the remaining of the week in order to be primed for session 4. The last session is one of the most important sessions of the week because it's the sessions that we'll use in order to hit our heavy bench press. The 4 or 5 bench press I hit that you saw in the intro of this video was hit on my day 4. So you don't need a full week of rest before hitting your PR. I think if you have a proper understanding of everything, you can and you will hit your PRs at the end of your weeks. Those 3 sessions actually set you up in order to perform on the last session. And the session 4 is usually the session that will actually progressively overload in terms of heavy single work. Like I said, session 3, we just simply practice the heavy singles, and on session 4, we actually want to add more weight week after week. So when you start your training block, let's say you're on week 1, you want to hit a heavy single on your day 4, but leaving room in the tank. So in terms of percentages, I think you can start with 90%, 91% of your 1RM that you hit on that day and slightly build and slightly improve upon that. A typical powerlifting program lasts from 4 to, let's say, maybe 6 to 7 weeks. So what I'll do personally is I'll start the week 1 at a certain percentage or RPE, and then I'll slowly increase that percentage or that RPE week after week. So the 405 I showed you happened on week 4. The week prior, on week 3, I had hit 385 pounds or 175 kilos, and the week even before that, which was week 2, I hit 374 pounds or 170 kilos. So the pattern that you clearly see is leave some room in the tank and progressively overload that day up until you reach a ceiling where you're like, okay, I can't do anything above that. Now time for a deload, and then you just repeat this cycle. And then to finish that day, I'll do some typical bodybuilding accessories where my goal will be to hit all of the main muscles involved in the bench press. So I'll do an exercise for chest, that's not the bench press obviously. I'll do another exercise for triceps, and then I'll finish up with an exercise for deltoids. Now keep in mind something. With regards to what I said, where you need to add weights progressively every week, don't tell yourself you're forced to add weight every week. For instance, it's completely fine to just repeat the same weight on your session 4 if you don't feel you can actually load more weight and have the proper recovery to then start another week. So it's completely fine if you do, let's say, for instance, 100 kilos on week 1 and you just repeat 100 kilos on week 2. The goal is to try to improve some details here and there. So if that 100 kilos moved better than the week prior, you actually got stronger. If you're feeling better underneath it, technically speaking, you will get stronger, and so on and so forth. So don't force yourself to add 2.5 or 5 kilos every week. The goal is to have a general tendency for growth, whether it's physically, but also in terms of strength over the weeks of your training program. And sometimes strength takes time in order to occur. So you need to train for given weeks before you get the effects of that weeks-long training. So don't rush it, take your time, follow your program properly, and you'll be sure to hit PRs at the end of your training blocks. So that was it for today's video, guys. I hope it was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. If that's the case, make sure to leave a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you up in the next one.